And our players across the league are too often the targets. This is not something any player in this league should have to tolerate.
Do you think Caitlin's being used as a pawn? Caitlin didn't bring racism to the WNBA. This has been happening. And that, I think, is what's been such a shock for all.
You know what? It feels like everyone is completely shocked by what's been unfolding. But honestly, for those of us who've been paying attention, this moment seemed inevitable. Everything truly erupted right here, and trust me, you'll want to stay until the very end to understand exactly why the Indiana Fever are on the brink of making some massive changes. The team recently released a series of major announcements, including a revelation about their star, Caitlin Clark, that has sent shockwaves throughout the league. And here's the kicker. Right in the middle of all this, the legendary Sue Bird stepped forward and fiercely condemned the rampant racism she witnessed in the WNBA. Let's be real. This was long overdue. Think about it. Countless legends, MVPs, and gold medalists have quietly endured similar obstacles and faced comparable challenges throughout their careers. But then, almost out of nowhere, someone finally found the courage, the sheer audacity, to speak out. Sue Bird wasn't talking just to hear her own voice, either. Oh no. She came armed with what can only be described as pyrotechnics, delivering heat and undeniable truth that simply couldn't be ignored. And let me tell you, the Indiana Fever camp responded with an impact that will shape their future. But before we dive into the specifics,
There is one thing I want to reset, that we want to reset, and it's the language being used around fans. Fever fans, Caitlin fans, new fans. That actually has to.
And here's the most unbelievable part. Sue Bird, with everything at stake, didn't hesitate for even a second before diving into a no-holds-barred podcast discussion with none other than Megan Rapinoe. It was a massive risk, one that could have easily damaged her career, but she went ahead anyway. During that podcast, she boldly raised the tough questions. She wanted to understand why Caitlin Clark had become the target of such intense racial hostility. Why were her remarkable achievements, her record-shattering sales, her undeniable influence, being so openly dismissed? And then, you know what's even crazier? She pushed things further, subtly hinting at the very real possibility of a systemic league conspiracy aimed specifically at Caitlin. Let that sink in for a moment.
Yeah. Did you, when you went and kind of swatted at Caitlin, did you intend to hit her in the eye? And if so, could you just, or if not, either way, could you talk about what happened on that play?
I don't even know why I would intend to hit anybody in the eye. That doesn't even make sense to me. But no, I didn't. I didn't know I hit her, actually. I was trying to make a play on the ball, and I guess I followed through and I hit her. So obviously it's never intentional. That's not even like the type of player that I am. So yeah.
Did you and Marina kind of laugh about it afterwards? It looked like there was later on in the game they caught you guys laughing about it.
No, I just told you I didn't even know I hit her. So I can't laugh about something I didn't know happened.
So, where did all of this truly start to boil over? It actually began when Carrington was approached by journalist Christine after a game regarding what seemed like a strangely unusual incident. Now, I know what you're thinking. You'd probably assume it was just another routine post-game question, right? Athletes are constantly dealing with inquiries about tough situations, controversies, and on-court issues. But this time, oh man, things went in a completely different direction and fast. Megan Rapinoe, with her trademark sharp wit, immediately pointed out that although the question might have sounded harmless on the surface, its wording carried a deeply troubling racial undertone. And just like that, an entirely new and honestly, absolutely crucial perspective erupted into the conversation, shifting the narrative in a dramatic way.
Obviously, hearing it initially, my visceral reaction was like, that's not good. That doesn't feel good. That feels racist, to be honest.
And let's be completely honest here. That felt racist. There was no denying the vibe. Sue Bird, being Sue Bird, absolutely refused to let the moment slip by without stepping into her trademark rebellious stance. She didn't just critique the situation. She openly blasted the media, calling out ESPN in particular for sensationalizing the matter and twisting it into something far more inflammatory than it ever needed to be. Her message was unmistakably clear. The original question may not have been inherently racist, but the way the media framed and presented it? Oh, my friends, that was unquestionably troubling. Sue carefully highlighted a stark, undeniable reality. Athletes of color are subjected to far more scrutiny and criticism than their white counterparts. Think about it this way. What really happens when a black athlete ends up in a similar scenario? Suddenly, it's no longer a simple incident. It escalates into something bigger, something heavier, a serious dispute or, all too often, a full-blown racial controversy. It's a double standard that's impossible to overlook.
Disagree with you on Christine Brennan's question being dickish, or maybe she shouldn't have answered it, because it was something that was out there that everybody was talking about. And so she asked the question, and it was a great opportunity for Carrington to, on the record, say, no, I didn't do it. And that's all that happened. So I do disagree with you. I don't think it was a dickish question. I think it was a fine question based on what was going on at the moment.
Sue, always the sharp observer, instantly connected the dots and made it clear that this wasn't some random, isolated moment. It was undeniably part of a much larger, deeply embedded pattern. And she said all of this while practically still warming up. Journalist Christine, to her credit, boldly called out both the WNBA and the media for their blatant failure to contain, or rather for allowing, these harmful rumors to grow and spread, even if she hadn't initially expected things to spiral so wildly out of control. Now, here's where Sue's perspective really lands with force. She argued firmly that if Carrington had been a white athlete, the entire situation would have drawn far less attention, likely fading away with barely a ripple. However, and this is the critical part, if a white player had found themselves in Carrington's exact position, we would have seen a fully developed, carefully crafted narrative unfold, complete with every emotional angle and possible consequence stretched to its maximum. The double standard couldn't be more obvious.
Led to the Twitter trolls and bots taking over. And what started there was this narrative of petty, jealous players hating on Caitlin. That's really what happened. That's where it started. That we must just dislike her, that we look at her side-eyed, that we don't want her to come in the WNBA and be successful, that we're hating on her, right? So we're petty.
In the immediate aftermath, it turned into nothing less than a full-scale Twitter takeover. Bots and trolls everywhere, feeding and amplifying a toxic narrative. And it all started with an unbelievably flimsy yet widespread storyline suggesting that petty, small-minded, jealous fans were simply hating Caitlin Clark. In reality, that's exactly what took place. The narrative kicked off with this insidious claim: we just don't like her. We refuse to understand her perspective. We don't want her to thrive in the WNBA, and therefore we despise her. In short, the message was, we're envious and petty. And here's where things get downright wild. Sue went on to methodically explain how one single, seemingly harmless comment from none other than Diana Taurasi, one of the sport's most iconic legends, became the spark that ignited this dangerous narrative. Yes, the legend herself casually delivered a statement so inherently powerful that it practically set the entire WNBA on fire. We're talking complete, unfiltered chaos erupting simply because of the massive, unforeseen ripple effect of those initial words. Sue Bird, acting as the lone voice of reason, had no choice but to step in and thoroughly break down what was unfolding. And this time, the fallout was far greater and far more destructive than anyone anticipated. When Sue said things got ugly, she wasn't talking about normal competitive roughness or an occasional on-court scuffle. No. She meant the game stopped being about basketball the moment outright hate speech started appearing, because once fans begin getting enraged over issues that stretch far beyond the court, issues like racism, entrenched privilege, and every other unpleasant reality imaginable, that's when you know a line has been crossed.
At any point did I think anybody was playing dirty against Caitlin? Not at any point did I think Caitlin was targeted. And I'm going to stop on that word because what happened was these petty, jealousy,
narratives that got formed. Then, when the season started and people saw people blocking Caitlin's shot or picking her up full court, it then became, oh, they're targeting her.
And then Sue Bird dropped yet another bombshell, revealing that Caitlin Clark was dealing with far more than the usual elbows and routine trash talk. Oh no, this was something entirely different. We're not talking about symbolic hits here. Caitlin was literally dodging real ones. Even worse, she felt immense pressure to constantly brace herself for threats that went far beyond simple game plans every single time she stepped onto the court. This was absolutely not fair play. Players were deliberately and maliciously mocking her. Sue made it unmistakably clear that this wasn't just about tightening up her defense. The usual roughness, the expected physicality of a WNBA match, none of that compared to the sheer hostility and targeted animosity Caitlin was facing. This was deeply personal and undeniably vicious. Importantly, Sue, with her deep understanding of league dynamics, did not downplay the racial element at all. She explained that Caitlin's situation carried a complex, layered dynamic that went far beyond why she was receiving so much attention or why she seemed to be promoted ahead of others. It was a volatile blend of racism, privilege, and the long-standing frustrations of players of color who saw her accomplishments as symbolic of something far bigger than her actual basketball talent. Sue didn't hold back. This was no longer just a sports issue. It had become a powerful reflection of the wider systemic racial tensions running through the league and the boiling frustrations that were now shockingly unfolding in real time on the court. And right at the center of all this turmoil was Caitlin Clark, tragically caught in the brutal middle of it all.
It is right now, like it's popping right now, and just being able to know that, like, I'm happy where we are. I'm happy to see all the girls being able to pop it and look cute on the runway and being able to continue that. Because
now shifting gears, some of the most outspoken critics, like Angel Reese and Alyssa Thomas, have vehemently argued that Caitlin Clark is essentially benefiting from what they call the white girl pass. They haven't held back, either. In fact, they've been very public with their criticism, even accusing Caitlin Clark and parts of her fan base of harboring underlying racial bias. Sue Bird, in her trademark unfiltered style, spoke openly about Angel Reese and Alyssa Thomas, as if she'd been holding onto this tea for far too long and was finally ready to spill it. And let me tell you, Angel Reese has been boldly confident and fiercely vocal ever since her explosive rise at LSU. Alyssa Thomas, meanwhile, is a true cornerstone, a foundational leader for the Connecticut Sun. Both of these influential athletes argue that, in their view, Caitlin has become the WNBA's poster figure for white privilege, insisting that she receives preferential treatment not because of her exceptional talent, but because of the color of her skin. It's a heavy accusation, and it's fueling a firestorm of debate.
Of what I've said led to this group of people being able to push those racist agendas, which really has been, in my opinion, the cause of all of this. And everybody from this moment on has, not everybody, but a lot of people have been operating under the assumption that these narratives, particularly the targeting narrative, is true.
But how did Sue respond to these serious accusations? Well, let me tell you, Sue Bird was absolutely not having it. She made it her personal mission to use every bit of her influence to show, unequivocally, that the white privilege narrative surrounding Caitlin Clark was, in her view, deeply misguided, entirely inaccurate, and something that needed to be dropped immediately. This is simply not the case, she stated, loudly and with unwavering conviction. From her perspective, what Angel Reese and Alyssa Thomas were putting forward wasn't just ethically questionable, it was actively and profoundly harmful to the league and its players. In Sue's eyes, their stance wasn't building anything, it was tearing things down.
Racism has been impacting the WNBA well before this year. This is not a new thing.
Sure.
This is, and in that way, I do think Caitlin's being used as a pawn. Caitlin didn't bring racism to the WNBA. This has been happening. And that, I think, is what's been such a shock for all of us, that other people are surprised by this.
Here's the heart of Sue Bird's perspective, her ultimate take on the situation. Essentially, she argued that Caitlin Clark is receiving a tremendous amount of attention, but let's not, for a second, pretend it's solely because she's white. No, It's because she is an absolutely phenomenal, once-in-a-generation talent. Bird firmly believes that the entire episode has been deliberately distorted, warped into a sprawling narrative that barely resembles reality. With her sharp intellect and unwavering integrity, Sue refused to let Reese and Thomas sensationalize or misrepresent what's happening, especially when Caitlin Clark is already under such intense scrutiny. Let's be honest, Caitlin's rise through the ranks has been meteoric, and her dominance on the court is indisputable. Her sheer impact is spectacularly clear to anyone who watches her play. She earns every bit of the spotlight she's in.
She's obviously doing amazing. Her game speaks for itself. I think my favorite part is just women's basketball, women's sports really, but women's basketball has been on the rise. And it's kind of like what Magic and Bird was to men's basketball. Like this moment, we kind of needed something.
This is
to
that
just
moment.
and Caitlin's that moment. And I think a lot of it has to do with her logo.
Prepare yourselves for one of the most shocking revelations yet. Sue Bird revealed that she had personally communicated with Caitlin Clark, getting to know her and understanding her journey firsthand. This insight directly challenges the white privilege narrative that Reese and Thomas have aggressively pushed. Sue made it emphatically clear that Caitlin is not some athlete who gains advantages simply because of her skin color. Like every dedicated player, she has worked relentlessly, grinding tirelessly, and earning her ascent through sheer effort. Bird, fearless as ever, openly admitted that the situation is far more complex and nuanced than most people are willing to see, and she insisted that this divisive narrative must be dismantled. She acknowledged why some fans may have reacted emotionally, but emphasized that the problem extends far beyond casual Fever supporters. Within the fan base exists a toxic segment actively promoting hate speech, advancing racial agendas, and fueling division online. On the surface, they appear to be fans, but their intentions are anything but supportive. At this point, the situation had escalated to a deeply concerning level. Sue insisted that this entire racial issue had been cynically weaponized, creating a pretext for other players to target Caitlin Clark, not just verbally, but physically, right on the court. The charge of racism was being misused to justify mistreatment, and the conflict had long since moved beyond basketball strategy. Bird made it clear that the game had become less about competition and more about personal attacks, with grievances rooted in deep-seated racism, jealousy, or other negative emotions. As a result, Caitlin endured relentless verbal abuse alongside overt physical targeting, including deliberate elbows and unnecessary roughness, exemplified by Lady Carter's infamous cheap shot. According to Sue, the racial bias debate had been twisted into something harmful, with Reese and Thomas actively exacerbating the volatile situation, using the court as a battleground for their own grievances instead of genuinely addressing systemic racial issues in the league. Bird clarified that she is not against discussing race. Rather, she believes that the current approach is entirely misguided, fostering division instead of unity. The pressing question now is how the Indiana Fever will respond to this unprecedented situation. This kind of divisiveness is completely at odds with the values of the team and the league. It's not representative of true Fever supporters, nor the organization's mission. We are now entering a pivotal, thrilling period for the franchise, and decisive action is required. The next steps involve climbing from 6th place into the top 4 seeds, and Caitlin Clark, an exceptionally competitive rookie, has already made a significant impact. She adapted quickly to the league, demonstrating relentless drive in every drill, from shooting exercises to scrimmages, pushing herself to achieve unparalleled greatness. Her elite playmaking, basketball IQ, and ability to elevate teammates have solidified her as a once-in-a-generation talent. Her accomplishments this past year unequivocally place her in the elite category, transforming everyone around her with her influence on the court. Many underestimated the scope of her impact, but she has surpassed all expectations. Strategically, the Fever are on the cusp of a major transformation. Amber Cox has officially arrived, Kelly Krauskopf has been reinstated as president of basketball and business operations, and a new general manager has been appointed. This powerful front office is set to implement sweeping adjustments as players depart, new talent joins, and the roster evolves throughout the winter. Caitlin Clark will inevitably lose some close friends during this process, but she will also witness certain individuals she wants removed, including head coach Christian Sides, being dismissed. Yes, the organization will be reshaped and refined through these monumental changes, steering the team toward a dramatically different and hopefully brighter future. With a completely revamped roster strategically centered around Caitlin Clark, the Fever are now positioned to fiercely compete for a coveted spot among the league's top teams. The 2025 season promises to be a defining moment, not just for Caitlin, but for the entire franchise as it navigates this unprecedented, high-stakes transformation.